All right, here we go, everybody. Yes, what a day in court. Actually, a big day to be in court because you couldn't have the video feed in court, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. We're going to be starting, yep, there we go. Okay, so 12:59, we're going to be starting in just a moment. And again, good afternoon. Let me check everything. We are here and make sure. Yep, got a little too much headroom there, Harry. Okay, so that is fine on X, and we're good on YouTube. And I'm going to check the Facebook feed. Folks, remember, you can always listen online. We're live on the radio. Oh, I still hear myself. There we go. The sun just came out, and it is turning into a nice Wednesday, day 15. Yes. There was a discrepancy whether it's 15 or 16, but I'm going to go with, oh, good. All right. Gian says we're good to go. Let me just check. So I want to see how long the lunch break is. Back at 1:40. Okay. Maureen Hart, she's big. We'll get to the latest. These are long days and nights because of doing the court TV thing live 9 to 10. But it's worth it. All right, let me check. We're going to be live just a couple minutes. I'll tell you everything. Boy, the sound sounds great as I'm listening on Facebook. It sounds terrific, as a matter of fact. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so they're talking to Matt Johnson. Hey, good to know I'm not the only one that they come up to and people start saying, so what's happening in there? Okay. And it was. The niece testimony was big. He's patient. He gives updates. Well, I'm gonna have to take a nap later this afternoon. I'm gonna have to. It's the only way I'm gonna make it. It may not seem long, but it's long. Let's see. Snooze. Good. Molly. Matt. Okay. All right, we're live in 3 minutes. 2 minutes out. The definitive update. And tonight, live with Vinny Politan. As of right now, it's 9 to 10. I'll let you know if it changes, but I believe it's 9 to 10. All right, we're going to start in 2 minutes. 2 minutes out. Ugh. 1 minute. 1 minute out. Ugh. I was in the courtroom. The niece was there. Turning point in the trial. Oh, the numbers on X are good. There's a YouTube crowd. All right, getting there. Hi there, Jezebel. Well, I'll be there, Jennifer. And we are going to begin at 1:06. Once again, look at this. The sun is out. We are in Dedham, outside of the Karen Reed trial. Now, right now, we are live on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM. Don't forget that. Starts at 11, goes till 2, live right now. Can always listen. Oh, there's where the echo is. Okay. There's Michael Blade. Yes. You can always listen online at the website, depetro.com. Now, right now, we are live on X. We are live on our Facebook page, and we are live on YouTube as well. I have people asking me, well, can't you go live on, maybe we'll try that. Maybe we'll go live on TikTok tomorrow. I don't know. We've done that in the past. But right now at 1:06, this was a big day, and this is where it's valuable to be in the courtroom. I was in the courtroom today. I'll be in the courtroom tomorrow, Friday, and I will be in the courtroom next week as our streak continues. I will sleep this weekend. It's not a problem, folks. But let's get to it. This was a big day. This was a real big day in the courtroom, in the trial, the retrial of Karen Reed. And I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. And I'm going to go through my notes. And I want to address, I guess, listen, how people comment of their notes in the courtroom and the jury. I, you know, it's an individual thing. I'm not putting down everything that some of the state police got up there really quick. But let me stay on schedule, folks. This portion of our program is brought to you by PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. See, stop in. Everything's available: annuals, perennials, trees and shrubs, hanging pots, 10-inch, 12-inch moss baskets, hanging impatiens, pansy, marigold bags, large selection of beautiful patio pots, vegetable plants and herbs, tropical mandevillas and hibiscus plants. They have it all. I share their Facebook page. Stop it and see them. It's PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center, 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. Make sure you check out our website, which is depetro.com. No eyes. DEPETRO.com, brought to you by the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge, and the waiting for you at the Coesit Inn. So the niece of John O'Keefe testified in court this morning, and there was no video of it. It's a juvenile testifying, so they stayed consistent with that. Just to set the stage, this is someone that 3 years ago, she was 14 years old when this happened. She's now 17. She's a junior in high school. if you remember the testimony, they were going out. Michael Camerano and John were going to go out and kind of celebrate that the girls, Michael Camerano's daughter, and the girls had gotten into Bishop Fian, and they were excited about it. So she has been living with this since since January of 2022, and she walked through very gingerly what happened in those early morning hours. Now, I also want to mention to people, there's, I mean, right now there's no what I would call like total smoking gun. It's a series of things that then collectively, when added together, that's what brings it all in. So I want to talk a little bit about the niece on the stand and what you also need to understand. And we'll talk about this tomorrow with our legal expert, attorney Stephanie Murphy. But there's certain things that they want to pull from the witness, so to speak. And as far as the niece, number one, children are very believable in court. You know, I want to quote Wendy Murphy put out a text, and she's exactly right. And Wendy Murphy put out John's niece is powerful for prosecution. John's niece, very powerful. Three ways. Defense won't dare suggest she's part of a conspiracy, and no, they didn't do that. Number two, kids are highly credible with juries because they aren't sophisticated enough to lie well. And three, jurors will feel deeply for orphan kids no matter whose side they're on. So, what is interesting, folks, is if there's obviously, and I've said this, obviously his mother was impacted and his father was in court, and obviously his brother Paul and Paul's children and his friends. But the two individuals that were truly dependent on Officer John O'Keefe were his niece and nephew, right? Patrick and Kaylee. And so their life was turned upside down. Keep in mind, their parents passed away. So they lost their mother, and then they lost their father, and then their uncle JJ, Johnny, comes in and he's making the best of it. And then, they're involved with the family and so forth, but their life was really impacted. So they now live in the house, and then, the grandparents are there as well, Peg O'Keefe and then John's dad. But some things, first of all, she was very calm and she had a great demeanor on the stand, the niece now. And she's, as I said, been dealing with this since she was 14 years old. She's going to be 18 in October. I'm told that she will have a lot to say about this when she's an adult. But let's just stick with this morning. What I thought was significant, you should know, and what I noticed the jury. And I also want to mention something about the jury. There's one juror, I'm not going to say who, but there's one juror, it's a male. He's always making odd faces. He seems to be, an odd individual. And what I've noticed is certain members of the media, they're always dwelling just on him. He always seems to have an odd smirk. Always, no matter what's going on. This guy I bet he's been like this his whole life. I bet when he was in, fourth grade, he had an odd smirk on his face. So he always looks odd. But I've noticed certain members of the media, they zone in on him. So they'll say, oh, the jurors smirking. This guy's he's just got like this weird demeanor. Like, who knows what the deal is? But the bulk of the jury, they understood the weight of this. So, what was so significant? Couple of things. They played that clip of Karen saying, "Oh, I never would have broken up with John." Then she had another clip they played where Karen said, "Well, I don't know what would have happened if John had found out about Higgins." She said that last June. So there's conflicting statements from the defendant on exactly the nature of the relationship. First she's saying, "Oh, we wouldn't have broken up." Well, the niece testified towards the end of 2021, December. They were fighting a lot. And you know what I felt so bad, folks, and I want you to understand this, is it's so inappropriate. You think of her, he's not the father, she's the girlfriend, incessantly calling, causing problems in the house, fighting with him, refusing to leave. The guy is trying to raise his niece and nephew. Like Karen Reed, regardless what you think of that, she's just like so selfish and so childish and adolescent behavior. And the fact the niece said, well, she seemed to favor, my brother, Pat, the nephew more. And Karen would give her the cold shoulder. It's just, can you imagine? She's 13, 14, such an impressionable age. She lost her mom. And this is the reaction, but they're fighting a lot. And they talk about the Aruba trip. And there was one time they were fighting in the house and said a lot of times it was on the phone. And she could tell that John was upset and getting frustrated. And then he would even say to Karen, why don't you just like leave? Right. I got to do some things with them. And she would refuse to leave the house. But John, according to the niece, was upset. And it just seemed selfish that um, she would be arguing with him, knowing that they're home. And he didn't like that. And the niece also testified that, John had said that he felt the relationship had run its course. And that is a phrase that I thought was so powerful because that's not a phrase a child would use, but it is a phrase that would stick in her mind. The relationship was kind of coming to an end. Um, John O'Keefe made it clear to his niece that I took it akin to, listen, don't, I know the fighting it's embarrassing to me. I'm sorry you have to hear some of this stuff, but like, don't worry, we're not going to have to deal with it much longer. He was planning, like, I can't take this anymore. So, but the morning of, there's some things that are definitely important, but end of 2021, early 2022, they're fighting a lot. And that's consistent with, the explosion and the Aruba trip and so forth. But let's get to what was the morning. And by the way, the niece described Karen as she was always loud and she would get angry and upset. She'd be the more explosive of the two. So, and can you imagine at her age and her boyfriend is saying, listen, I'm tired of arguing with you. Just why don't you, go home for a while? We'll talk later. And she would refuse to leave the house. But here's the part that I think really stood out. And it was the early morning hour. And Karen Reed is shaking her and waking her up and, saying, I need you to wake up. She needed some phone numbers. And Karen Reed didn't have them, but she knew the niece did. So we need to call Jen McCabe. And after they call Jen McCabe, and keep in mind the niece has her number, and the same thing with Kerry Roberts. Karen, according to the niece, that morning said, could I have done something? Was he hit by a plow? And then Karen Reed said, and this is testimony on the record, maybe I hit him. Now, why that is so important is prior to this, as you know, Jen McCabe was attacked for saying that she said that. The first responders were saying it. Why this is so important is this was being said. This was between 4:30 and 5. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And I want to break it out and just really set the scene because I know we have a number of new people that are tuning in. Not everyone knows the case, and I get that. But folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by Propane Plus. Call them today. Heating and cooling. Call Propane Plus 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. Propane Plus, always online at propaneplus.com. They also have a very user-friendly website. It's propaneplus.com. You just type in your zip code, residential or commercial, type it in, Propane Plus, 401-885-4209. Also, maybe it's time, excuse me, time for a new roof. Roof Co. Rhode Island. Call them. Free estimate 401-868-7149. Joe, that could improve the value of your home or business with a new roof. Roof Co. Rhode Island. And it's very possible that you've had your roof has experienced wind damage or a leaky roof or missing lifted or curled shingles or maybe granules in the gutter or damaged chimney flashing. Roof Co. Rhode Island. Give them a call today And again, free estimate 401 868 7149. I share their Facebook page. So just to set this, who in their right mind would think? Let's just back up for a moment. These are two adults. They're both in their 40s. He's a 6'2" Boston police officer. You're dropping him off at a house that a bunch of people are gathering at, where they're going to have a few drinks instead of just calling it a night. And she's calling and calling and calling over 52 times. Plus, she called her parents. But who in their right mind? I'll just answer my own question. It's not logical to say maybe he got hit by a plow. Why would you think anything would have happened to him? If he hasn't come home, maybe he's still at the house. Maybe he decided to crash. Maybe he met someone at the party. Maybe I think Jen McCabe had mentioned that there's a friend of John's that was maybe going to appear. Maybe he ended up hooking up with him. Maybe he had an old girlfriend in the neighborhood and ended up with her. Of all the checklist of things you would think about, suburban now, right? A suburban guy, you last saw him at 12:30. So let's go through 1:30, 2:30, 3:30. So 4 hours later, and he's not home, and you had dropped him off. So you would think, who would think? I'll answer. No, that's not a logical leap. Maybe he got hit by a plow. I mean, that's insane. We're only talking 4 hours. Like, when did she start thinking that? Did she start thinking that at 1:30? Did she start thinking that at 2:30? Did she start thinking that at 3:30? Maybe he got hit by a plow. So the testimony of the niece, what does that do? Well, as I said, it was between 4:30 and 5. According to John O'Keefe's niece, Karen Reed, that was the first time she started saying, maybe I hit him. Maybe, did I hit him? Maybe I hit him. I also think it's interesting that as much as they try to argue about I hit him was preceded by a could I and then ended with a question mark. Does it really matter? It's not logical that it would be entering her mind. Maybe I hit him. She said last week outside of court that she saw him go in the house. The evolving story of this. Now, the niece also said that she knew Jen McCabe. She was friends with Jen McCabe's daughter. Jen McCabe had been her basketball coach. And the niece also said that Jen McCabe was friends with John. That reinforces Jen McCabe as a witness, who, as I have told you, was a very strong and excellent witness. Kerry Roberts. Kerry Roberts went to high school with John. Um, these were not two people plotting against him. These were not two women that were engaged in any form of a conspiracy. And I don't think, I mean, I believe it'd be ludicrous for anyone to think the niece is also involved in this whole thing. So my point is that testimony of her already openly saying that this isn't the first responder. It's not Nuttall. It's not Katie McLaughlin. And it's not John McCabe. It's the defendant herself at Meadows with John's niece. And she could hear her on the phone talking with people saying, maybe I hit him. Did I hit him? But let's just be rational now, because I try to be amongst a lot of the noise. It's not a to immediately jump to maybe he was hit by a plow. That makes no sense in any way. You wouldn't think that. So if you went through the list, as I said, you would think maybe he fell asleep at the party. Maybe it got late and he just crashed there. Maybe one of his friends came in and got him. She knew the McCabes were going to be in the house. Maybe he stayed over at the McCabe house. Maybe he hooked up with Bella's mom. There's a lot of different scenarios that could have played out, but getting hit by a plow is not one of them. Now, so this is all with the niece on the stand. Now, there was this was a big witness. And I want to be very clear. For anyone looking for a smoking gun, it's not coming here. There's a lot of little things that add up. And the niece being who she is, and David Yannetti did cross-examine her a little bit, but it makes Jen McCabe look better. I'm not saying she needs to. It helps Kerry Roberts. It establishes that they were friendly with John. And that also establishes Jen McCabe was her basketball coach. This is someone that's been in her life. Folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by Kids Club on the Pike. Now, Kids Club on the Pike, this is the perfect spot. Birthday party venue, before and after school care, preschool, Kids Club on the Pike, and reserve your space for summer camp at Kids Club on the Pike, 401 443 5336. They're right off of 295 on the Cranston Johnston line. It's Kids Club on the Pike, and spots are filling up fast for their summer camp. It's Kids Club on the Pike, 401 443 5336. Well, folks, good afternoon. Again, I want to depending on where people are listening or watching, it could be morning. I'm hearing from more and more people that are listening from different parts of the country. So sometimes I say good afternoon, sometimes I say good morning. It depends on where you are. I'll just say where we are. So, but what also came out was when they got back from the hospital and they're at Meadows, and she said Karen Reed's father came in, the brother came in. That's consistent with testimony that we've heard, whether it be from Peg O'Keefe or Kerry Roberts or Jen McCabe. Um, Karen Reed had said she wanted to go back to the house. What was her motivation to go back to the house? Now, Karen Reed claimed she wanted to comfort the children. She wanted to comfort the niece and nephew. She wanted to see them. According to the niece, Karen didn't even talk to them. According to the niece and according to her grandmother, Peg O'Keefe, Karen and the father went right upstairs to where the ring camera footage was. According to the niece, Karen Reed never comforted her, never came over to her, and instead she said out loud, now this is Karen, according to the niece, Karen said, I am living a nightmare. That's another self absorbed comment to me. You know who's really living the nightmare? The mother losing another child. We know Peg O'Keefe. We had testimony where Peg O'Keefe had said, I can't go through this again because she had already lost an adult child. You know who else was living a nightmare? Was the niece and nephew. But notice, who does Karen focus on? Never checked in on the niece. The niece also said, as Karen was frantic, and I actually think that Laura McLaughlin, I think, could have got a little more out. I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback. I think she could have got a little more out of him. Had she showered? Did she smell like booze? I don't know. I'm going to trust they knew what they were looking to get from the niece. It was uncomfortable. You can tell this is not something the niece talks about. You could also tell it isn't something she likes reliving. It was a nightmare. This had never happened before. He had never not come home. It's the early morning hours. But she said Jen McCabe was level headed. Jen McCabe was level headed while Karen was frantic. So, again, what did the niece testify? JJ is how they called him, John O'Keefe. He wanted the relationship to end. They had been fighting a lot. That also comes back to the text messages of that day between John and Karen, where he said, I'm just tired of all the fighting. That backs up the text messages. She was trying to pretend, oh no, things were going great. Things weren't going great. Karen Reed was trying to give the impression, oh yeah, things were going along great. No problems in the relationship at all. That's not true. There were actually a lot of problems in the relationship. She was texting Higgins, right? She was hitting on Brian Higgins, flirting with him, telling him he's hot, basically inviting him to go over to her house. Higgins wouldn't take the bait on it. And it reinforces and validates those text messages where between John and Karen that day, where they're fighting, and John O'Keefe is saying that I'm just tired of all, the back and forth. Like, I don't want to live like this anymore. And I come back to, this is someone who we didn't get a full answer. Thank God, the cigarette smoke is brutal, folks. We didn't get an answer on yesterday. She seems fine. It's very possible Karen Reed just did not want to face the niece. So how was the niece? Now, the niece definitely did not like Karen Reed. The niece was referring to Karen Reed as the defendant until David Yannetti said, "What did you didn't call her that when she was in your life? You know, what did she, when you called her Karen?" He was trying to get her to just say her name instead of the defendant. I got the impression, and I don't blame the niece, by the way, but she does not like Karen Reed. Karen Reed, in her eyes, in the eyes of the niece, Karen Reed is responsible for the death of Officer John O'Keefe. Karen Reed destroyed the little new life that they had built, and she was living with her uncle after her mother and father had passed away. So no love lost at all. The nephew did not testify, but I want to come back to some of the things that the niece said. Folks, this portion of the program brought to you by Arch Design Builders. Call them today, 401 207 4124. 401 207 4124. Arch Design Builders, whether it's maybe are you listening or watching right now and you need a new kitchen or you need a new bathroom or basement or a deck or a special project? Arch Design Builders. Give them a call. It starts with that phone call. Make an appointment, 401 218 9707. 401 218 9707 for Arch Design Builders. You're going to love dealing with Ed and Roxanne. Well, again, I want to recap now. Big testimony with the niece of John O'Keefe in the courtroom. And I also want to touch on some of the questions. It's actually interesting to me to be part of Court TV. Vinny Politan is live from 8 to 10. And so I was there Monday night and then Tuesday night, and then I'll be on each night and so forth. But I want to just digress for a moment. Last night, when it's time that the audience can ask questions, a woman started asking about the dog. And Vinny, who has a very calm demeanor, by the way, and they run a good operation. They do. Grace, everybody. And so Vinny said, "How many people here think that the dog is a big deal?" Almost every hand went up. I it's when I see that, and maybe you're one of those people. And again, I'm not trying to change or convince anybody, but to me, you're like, there are still some people out there that still think that the Google search was done at 227. That's been disproven. These people think the dog, that those aren't dog bites. There's no dog DNA. The people that are saying that don't like, and I'm not going to argue with these people. Good enough to come out and they watch Court TV, and I mean, he's the one asking the question. But I still come back to they're not paying attention. They can't get him in the house. Do you understand that the defense doesn't have him in the house? The only person that's saying that John O'Keefe went in the house is Karen Reed, and she's not saying it in court. She's saying it outside the courtroom. But not one witness has him inside. His phone doesn't have him inside. These people asking about dog bites. He has no bites on his neck. He has no bites on his leg. He has no bites on his shin. He has no bites on the other hand. He doesn't even have bites on the hand. Why would it just be on the arm? Far more of the defensive. So, but that's the type of thing. Last night, someone also, and I'll come back to the niece, but last night someone also was saying, is there going to be criminal trouble for Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, because they, one had the phone, the extraction done, and then Brian Albert upgraded his phone. So, like, when I hear that, this person is still stuck thinking that there's a federal investigation. There's no federal investigation. There's no federal investigation. So, it just surprises me that there are people that out there that still think that. And this is where we're watching the trial. We're watching the testimony. For those that will step back, a very clear picture is emerging. This business of the house, and he was beaten to death in the basement. And believe me, I saw body of proof when defense attorney Alan Jackson says, well, no one heard in the house, because you can see he comes in and they say, hey, John, let's go down and talk in the basement. Boom. And then they beat him to death. Well, Do you understand? They don't have any testimony that puts him inside the house. It's all outside by the flagpole. And then her own words. Those clips were powerful today. Let me come back to the niece. Do you see the situation? There's more arguments. You know what else is interesting? There's more arguments after lunch and later in the day. If you've ever dealt with anyone with a drinking problem, what's the old expression? You don't want to catch them after lunch. I worked with someone like that one time. 2 hour lunches, you didn't want to catch him after lunch. Before he was going to, this is many years ago, this individual was going to leave the office. You'd want to catch him before he left the office. Because when he came back from the office, you didn't know what you're going to be getting after a 2 hour, 3 hour liquid lunch. So notice a lot of the arguments are later in the day. I feel when I listen to the niece and listening to her testimony and seeing this is very painful. Her family is in the courtroom. Paul O'Keefe, her uncle, is in the courtroom. His aunt's in the courtroom. Some of her cousins are in the courtroom. Her grandparents are in the courtroom. To have to leave this, what I found so sad was Karen Reed would give her the cold shoulder. Do you understand? She's a 13-year-old girl who lost her parents. Why on earth would you? What rational person would be giving her the cold shoulder? And I get it that Karen didn't have any children of her own. And then they tried to say, well, don't you remember she took you to get your nails done? She helped you with a school project one time. She brought you to Dunkin' Donuts. None of those things matter if you ram your SUV that weighs 6,000 pounds backwards and take the life of the uncle who's responsible for them. So, but a lot came out. The fact that it was embarrassing to John that Karen would flare up and fight in the house, oblivious to the fact that the niece and nephew were there and could hear it. That also, though, to me, that's commonplace and common with someone with a drinking problem, someone that's had a couple drinks. How many times you've been around someone that's been drinking, they don't realize how loud they are. They're oblivious to what else is going on. She just sounds, she's certainly not endearing. She's not understanding. She's not recognizing that he's got a lot on his plate. He's trying to juggle this, and she just seems interested in, she wants to drink a lot and fight in front of the kids. And the niece said she'd be loud and abusive and angry outbursts. And then John O'Keefe is calm, trying to say, listen, I got to work with them on something. Maybe you should just, and she'd refuse to leave that. No, I want to argue some more. Can you imagine? I want to get some drinks. I want some Tito's. No, we're going to argue about this more. And John O'Keefe would be saying, Karen, please lower your voice. I won't lower my voice. I don't care if everybody hears. Blah, 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 blah. Can you imagine listening to that? I cannot. He wanted the relationship over. Do you understand that? Karen, that morning, could I have done something? Maybe I hit him. Who would say that? I can't believe some of the people, well, if I was in a very traumatic situation, I might start to, who? Name someone who does that. Let's go to Dallas. Jackie O. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis didn't start saying, maybe I'm the one that shot JFK. That didn't happen, right? Let's go to with President Lincoln, with, Booth. By all accounts, Mary Lincoln never said, hey, maybe I'm the one that shot. I mean, it's not preposterous. It's the people trying to defend it. Yeah, maybe I'm the one that shot him. As I've said, if you ever came home and you had a family member laying dead in the kitchen and they're bleeding with gunshot wounds, no normal person would say, hey, maybe I shot him. You're not even home and you don't even have a firearm. So this whole business, well, she was so upset that she just started, but as others have said, when she arrived, she didn't say, what happened? She didn't say, Jen McCabe, hey, what happened? You were in the house. She never says that. This all comes up later. Actually, think about that, right? There is no report of Mary Todd Lincoln saying, hey, maybe I shot. I don't remember that. Mrs. Kennedy, what happened? I don't know. Something happened in Dallas. Maybe I shot him at the parade. Maybe it's not this guy Oswald or whatever happened. No, this morning reinforced, and I'm going to talk about the jury. This morning reinforced what we have been hearing from the prosecution. And it's, folks, I mean, look at what's happening. Yesterday, out of nowhere, Karen Reed panics and says, I'm sick. You know, as someone was telling me this morning, there's very little she controls in her life right now. Very little. She can't travel. She has to be in the courtroom. She has to sit there. She can't control what's said. They're telling her not to talk. There's a gag order on the defense. She has very little control over. She basically can pick out her clothes, even though they have um, gotten involved with that a little bit. That's why she's wearing blue today. But she has very little control over her life. So it's believed yesterday, in an act to show control, in an act to send a message to the niece saying, I'm still going to give you the cold shoulder. I'm going to say I'm sick and I'm going to make sure there's no court today. You know what that is? That's a pattern. I mean, that is a pattern that you're seeing and not a flattering one. I'm just thinking anyone, and I mean, I give Jen McCabe a lot of credit. Jen McCabe was her basketball coach. I know Matt McCabe, I believe, had been her soccer coach. You know, I've been that type of parent. You're involved. Hey, not everyone has the time, but they're engaged. You know, they're looking out for her. They're making sure she's getting to the game on time. They're making sure that she, if she stays over, that she's fed and clean and brought to school the next day. You could tell the niece has very strong feelings for Jennifer McCabe and Kerry Roberts. And just to say, Jen was level-headed. Jen had it together that morning. Karen was frantic. Can you imagine? I've heard it's horrifying. We had to listen to her relive being woken up, and this person who has not been kind to you. Save me the brought you to get your nails done. Save me the she gave her a Dunkin' Donuts thing. Um, didn't she? And then they're rolling through the list, right? Yannetti is, didn't she help you with a school project? Didn't she help you? Like we're cashing in the chit, you know? Didn't she help you get into that school? And then the niece said, well, I applied to couple schools. So I don't know, maybe. Didn't she go and tour with you to school? You know, the cross to say, you thought, like, we're going to cash in on the favor. Karen, she did you a favor. Do you think she wanted to take you to get your nails done? Do you think she wanted to take you to Dunkin' Donuts? Like, we're going to cash in a favor. You're going to say right now out loud how grateful you are to the defendant for taking you to get your nails done, to a 12-year-old. My God. Folks, this portion of the program, remember when disaster strikes, serve Pro of Providence. Call them 401 941 5500. Fast, thorough, professional. If you have fire, water damage, or mold, and that can happen. Maybe you have a building fire or a house fire. Serve Pro of Providence. Call them 401 941 5500. 401 941 5500. They're another one. I share their Facebook page. They're fantastic. 24/7. When disaster strikes, serve Pro of Providence. 401 941 5500. Well, folks, good afternoon. And it was very dramatic as the niece of Officer John O'Keefe took the stand. Again, she had to testify last spring. There she is, the ice princess that would give her the cold shoulder. There she is, the person being reminded, when you were 12, didn't she get you a lemonade? You know, that was the tone. You're ungrateful. Don't you understand? You think she wanted to give you that lemonade? Like, you little brat? Oh my God, to put these kids through this again. So, no, the niece told the story of someone that brought turmoil to their home. their niece, John O'Keefe's niece, told a story of someone that when she was in the home, when she was Beover Meadows, there was drama, there was loud fighting, there was turbulence, and she couldn't be shut up. And even when, this is her uncle. What Karen Reed was doing was disrespecting the home. This is my home. I live here with my niece and nephew. You're arguing, by the way, probably drunk. We can say that, right? Drinking at all hours of the day, probably drunk. Why don't you leave? In other words, why don't you go home and sleep it off? And we're trying to have a quiet afternoon and night here with my niece and nephew. I have the afternoon off. I've been working. They're home. We just want to enjoy ourselves as a family. No, I want to go get a drink. And if you're not going to drink with me, then I'll call Higgins or I'll call the plumber or I'll call someone else. Like who? No one in there, right? He didn't have the luxury. John O'Keefe didn't have the luxury to put up with such a loudmouth, let's call it for what it is, a loudmouth drunk who is then saying, like, you're ungrateful. Yeah, I took you to get your nails done when you were 13, and I prefer to be with your brother. Could you imagine doing that to a young girl who lost both of her parents, who's trying to keep it together? There was also a moment when they were asking her about the Aruba trip. And again, Karen flew off the handle and, as we know, exploded out of rage. But the niece, when they were then grilling her about, well, at Aruba, didn't she order you room service, you ingrate? Don't you understand? Didn't she give you $1 to go get a lemonade or something like that? But the niece said that in Aruba, this was on Cross by David Yannetti. I was dumped by my 8th grade boyfriend. So I was in crisis mode, and everyone kind of laughed. And her little cousins laughed because Yannetti was drilling down. And what about Aruba? And Karen ordered you room service. And were you there when Karen picked up the dinner? And were you like, everything is a chit, if you know that expression. Like everything, she remembers every little favor. And I gave her this, and I gave her a gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. And she has the nerve, this is Karen now, to come into this courtroom and say and testify that I was saying maybe I hit him, or I want to come back to the plow. Who would jump to that conclusion? Folks, that's not, as I've said, that's not a reasonable conclusion to get at. So to go from, that's odd, right? He's not home. You exploded. The voicemails, by the way, were very telling. The voicemails from Karen were alluding to, you're a pervert, right? And she was saying, and you're cheating on me, and you're with someone right now. So the the next jump would be Karen Reed saying, that's probably where he is. Here's what you wouldn't do. You wouldn't involve the niece. Karen Reed, is she oblivious that, for instance, is no one giving her advice? Is she clearly doesn't realize that that's not something you need to involve the niece and nephew of John O'Keefe. Whatever problems they were having, it should have stayed their problems. And it sounded like John wanted to keep it that way. But when you have loudmouth Karen causing a ruckus, causing fights, exploding right at him in Aruba, causing a scene, then you can't have something like that. But my point is, the voicemails where she hates him, that's what she said. You're using me, and you're a pervert, and you're with someone else right now, and other very graphic things that she said. So the fact he then is not answering or doesn't come home, I would think would lead down the line to, okay, he must have hooked up with, just as an example, Bella's mom. or maybe someone else that was going to be there, or maybe he went over somewhere else. So I could see if she woke up and then just, I don't know, made her way back to Mansfield, but not maybe, who would think that? Maybe he got hit by a plow. Yeah, maybe a spaceship came down and captured him. That's not a logical leap. The testimony of John O'Keefe's niece reinforces what we have heard from Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts. Now, I know some people may say, well, that's just the point. They're all in on it. I'm telling you right now, as you saw the niece, and there's, the grandparents sitting right there who are now raising them. I didn't get the vibe that the jury is thinking, oh, okay, so they got the niece involved with the conspiracy. I didn't get that impression anyway. Folks, this portion of the program, remember, Father's Day is coming up. J. Perry Paving. Call them 401 732 1730. 401 732 1730. Letter J. J. Perry Paving. Look for them online. They have a great social media presence. They'll give you a free estimate. Driveway, why not get your driveway paved? And on top of that, they have a great package for veterans. If you're a veteran, no one better than J. Perry Paving. Call them 401 732 1730. Father's Day coming up. If your dad is a veteran, why not get his driveway paved? They have a great package for veterans. It's J. Perry Paving, 401 732 1730 for letter J. J. Perry Paving. So I'm going to be going back into the courthouse for the afternoon session. And right now, they have State Police Crime Lab on the stand who is answering questions about pieces of glass that were found in the bumper, a hair found in the bumper, a number of things. It all seems to piece together. It all just seemingly is more of the same. It's just more of little pieces. And just to once again reiterate, I'm not saying that the jury didn't break down and start crying when they heard from the niece. That clearly did not happen. The jury did say, Your Honor, is there any way we could just stop the testimony and just, declare that she's guilty right now? That did not happen. But she was, I'll say this, she was very credible, the little niece. And folks, you feel terrible. And as I said, what I think it really does is you're seeing someone with the niece of John O'Keefe, that it's one thing when you have a family member that was clearly, um, feeling grief, that meaning that, like with the parents or the brother, that he lost his life. But what I thought made the niece different and impactful is you're seeing someone that was impacted firsthand, because she was depending on her uncle. She was living with her uncle. And what I found this morning was what I found in listening to the testimony from the niece, a pattern of immature, selfish behavior. John O'Keefe, there's nothing wrong with him saying, I don't want to argue in front of my niece and nephew, and setting that up as a ground rule. Karen, you need to be adult. I know you don't have children, and you're never going to have children with me, but I don't want to argue in front of them. And you have to, like, tape it down. You're too high strung, and all the fighting and the texting and the calling and the jealousy. Talk about high maintenance, demanding girlfriend. I want to go drinking. I want to do this. If you don't go with me, then I'm going to call Higgins. I mean, after a while, can you imagine having to listen to that? And then they try to go on a vacation with some friends and family. And again, she starts to explode. So just to repeat, I think it was also different There's no video of this. I can't, whatever anyone wants to put about jury observations, they're free to do it. I try to do it. I'll tell you this about a jury. My experience has been juries in general, they like to believe police. Remember, the court sheriffs are in charge of the courtroom. If you're the jury, the court sheriffs, they're the ones running the show, they're the ones bringing you in and out. When I have seen police first responders testify, they're sharp, they're polite, they fit the mold as we think of first responders. So I think that's a big positive for the prosecution. But the most productive things that I think that they were able to pull out of the niece was this was not everything's great in January and December. It sounds like it was 2 months for John O'Keefe to say to his niece, I think the relationship has run its course. I've been with her for 2 years now. I'm ready to, she's just too high maintenance. If she wants to chase someone else, like go ahead. That he wouldn't say that if everything was going great. I get that that night when you see them on the bar video, I get that she comes in and kisses her. Um, Listen, there's also a snowstorm coming, and I interpret that as he's a single guy in his 40s, Boston cop. He wouldn't mind a little company during, the impending blizzard where they're going to get snowed in. So as Karen had been described by a witness in the first trial, that he basically uh, just kind of viewed her as a babysitter with benefits. But it was starting to her outburst and drunken behavior and rage and her high maintenance behavior was starting to outweigh, it sounds like, a lot of the benefits. But when she testified, Karen Reed said, "Could I have done something? Was he hit by a plow? Maybe I hit him." Folks, how many more times of a confession do people need to hear? But as I have stated, I mean, with some people, we've reached a point that if Karen Reed called a press conference and said she was taking a plea deal and admitting to it or pulled them aside, or if the juror turned defense attorney, Victoria George, says, I had to leave because I found out that it was all fabricated, there were still people out there that would say, no, I don't believe you, Karen. There's something wrong with you, Karen. They don't want to believe it. But if you step back, why would the niece say that? And I can already hear, I know people say, because she was brainwashed and Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts jumped into action because they were friends with John, because they cared about John. And Jen McCabe cared about John's niece and cared about Peg O'Keefe and cared about the nephew. Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts, you could tell from the niece, are dependable friends of John who love John. And I believe the jury got it. If people just want to mention one juror that makes these weird faces and he has this weird look about him and smiles. When I'm viewing it, he's not reflective of the entire jury. And anyone that says it's moronic to say the whole jury was laughing at the police, that is simply not true. And by the way, many times jury's opinions on a witness can change. I've had witnesses say in the beginning, I felt like such and such a juror was with me. Then on the second day, I felt they weren't with me, or the other way around. I wasn't sure what to think, and then I could feel that they were kind of on my side. So my point is, perspectives can change. Someone can't just say juror one is for, juror two is against, juror three is against. You can't say that. It's the entire body of everything put together. Folks, this portion of the program, Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call them today. They can resurface a pickleball court. They could resurface a tennis court or a basketball court. They epoxy garages, patios, decorative concrete flooring. Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call them today, 401 283 9815. 401 283 9815. Call Corey. They can make your payment look like new. They epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring, seal coat the driveway. quality asphalt seal coating. 401 283 9815 for quality asphalt seal coating. All right, now we are live each weekday during this time, 1 to 2. The radio show starts at 11 and then runs until 2 o'clock. If you're listening to the radio, you want to stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. Now, everybody else, and I know so many people love Road Patrol Live, we're doing Court TV again tonight. So that is, listen, it's just they're only in town for this week, and then we'll get back to our normal routine. So the remaining part of the afternoon, again, I think the big story today is the niece testifying, and I think I gave you a pretty good rendition, so to speak, of what I thought were the bullet points to take out of it, and that was it was consistent and it backed up testimony of Kerry Roberts and Jen McCabe. Great job by Gian. Radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. We're going to be back later on with an update.